very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank all of you all for being here. I know that the folks assembled here today are the good guys. We're just trying to figure out how we get it where it's right. And so with that being said, I think I'm hearing some meeting of the minds going on. So, Dr. Budget, am I hearing you say that the IOC is prepared to not only relinquish the governance board or the direct contact with the governance board, but also investigations and testing, or have I gone a bridge too far?
You're absolutely correct about the investigation testing, and that is something the IOC have called for since the Olympic Summit, and it's very important. We certainly want to do it for sport, and I think actually there's a conflict of interest with government as well, because actually that's what was happening in Russia. So we need to look across the whole of anti-doping. And when it comes to the governance of WADA, I think that has to go through due process. And so I don't know exactly what structure will come out, what representation there will be from sport, whether it will be a minority representation, so there's some link, but that is for the people in charge of governance to sort out. But certainly on the actual testing and the whole structure around that, that will be completely independent.
And then the governance board is in question, but you anticipate some reforms before the end of this year?
I certainly hope so. The first meeting's in a week or so.
All right, I appreciate that. Let me ask this question, as long as I've got you. And it may be what Mr. Keeler touched on earlier. Mr. Nelson showed us his medal earlier, and you know that was really a special moment. But a food court in Atlanta is not appropriate. I would just say, as somebody who tries to problem solve, and I know a lot of us up here do that, even when we have disagreements, we try to problem solve. Why not weave in any medals that are given late because somebody cheated at the opening ceremonies of the next Olympics for that particular sport? Seems to me that would make Mr. Nelson's experience much more special. Wasn't going to ask you if you thought that was good, but do you think that sounds like a better way than getting it with a Happy Meal?
It was a really cool toy. Yes, I think that's a big step forward and would certainly recognize the issue and not sort of try to sweep it under the rug, which I think is important as well.
Yeah. Mr. Phelps, I think the entire American swimming team brought this up, maybe accidentally, but with Lily King and others talking about this openly at the Olympics last summer, it became an issue that most Americans are now aware of, and probably millions more around the world. I appreciate you all doing that, and appreciate you being here today and taking out your time to join us. Is there anything that you want to touch on that you haven't had an opportunity to speak on thus far?
Not today. I mean, I will say I agree with what you're saying about going to the next Olympics. You know, for me, as I said in my testimony, there's nothing better than watching your flag rise, listening to the national anthem. You know, for me, that's one of the greatest things that I will miss the most. And to being able to represent your country and have that moment, that special moment, I feel he deserves that.
And I completely agree. I will take you back in time a little bit. How long did it take you when you started complaining about the long swimming suits before the IOC changed those? Because we've been working on drugs for 30, 40 years. Didn't it only take the swimming suits got changed in a couple of years?
It wasn't long.
Yeah.
I know, I think the larger suits probably came out in 07-ish, and by World Championships of 09, that was the last chance that anyone had the opportunity to swim in them. And like I said then, that took away from the actual sport. Mm-hmm. That wasn't the sport. It was swim manufacturers trying to come up with a suit that they think is the fastest, and some of them were different than others. And you can go into a lot of different technical parts there, but and quickly we got that removed. So hopefully we can get this resolved as well.
Yeah, and I hope so too. Mr. Taggart, I know you've indicated some frustration, but what you're hearing today, does that give you some hope that we are in fact on the right path to getting this situation? Look, there's always going to be cheaters, but getting it to a point where we're actually governing?
Our position, along with 22 other national anti-doping organizations around the world, is crystal clear that we have to remove the fox from the governance. So if WADA's governing board still determines the consequence, for example, of an investigation, and still determines what testing plans are acceptable, still is responsible ultimately for determining who is in compliance with the rules, who is not. That's no different than what we currently have. And so we're not in agreement with that, and we'll continue to push because we recognize the solution is to remove the fox from guarding the henhouse because you can't effectively promote and police. And athletes can't believe in a system when sport still determines what's in its best interest and controls the material aspects of anti-doping.
And just quickly going back to Mr. Nelson's situation, don't you think we can do this a little faster than 8 years and finding out who the cheaters are?
We should prevent them from coming to begin with. And in Rio, there was 1,913 athletes. 1,913 athletes out of the 11,000 athletes in Rio from 10 high-risk sports that had no tests of record prior to the Rio Games. 10 high-risk sports, how unacceptable is that? That's what happens when sport, and it's the IOC's responsibility for the games, that's what happens when sport attempts to protect it and police itself. And the announcements following that report was that the integrity of the games was upheld. I'm not sure it was, but at the end of the day, we need to stop that from happening to ensure that we prevent dopers from going to the games to begin with.
And my time is up, so I yield back.
Mr. Phelps, were you going to?
Travis, what did we say the number was for 6 months leading into the games that I was tested? Was it Baker's dozen? Is that what he
Baker's
said?
dozen.
It was Baker's dozen. So he's saying there's over 1,900 athletes in the top 10 sports that weren't tested?
And you were tested a dozen times.
13, yeah.
13. Baker's at 13. Baker's says, oh, Baker's.
He's not counting.
Thank you. Ms. Schakowsky, recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I really want to thank the witnesses and actually the